Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to quickly introduce you guys to Sigma rules and also how we can use Preco to serve as another rule detection engine on top of our SIEM logs. So stick around and we'll jump into it. And all right, so throughout the series so far, we have just been using our Wazoo manager to give us our rule detection capabilities, which is a very optimal solution. However, there are other opportunities for us to add on to our SIEM stack. And throughout this video, I'm going to introduce you guys to a tool called Preco. So what exactly is Sigma? In the past, SIEM detections were very kind of vendor specific, and there wasn't really a good way for organizations to share their kind of detection rules that they have written. So similarly to Yara, Sigma has a pretty strong community that is always contributing rules. And Sigma is, you can think of like a common kind of language scheme. So allows for people to upload rules, and those rules are easy to understand, easy for our end users like ourselves who want to integrate it with our own platform to be able to take pieces of that rule and implement them to like a Wazoo detection rule or a Preco detection rule. And there's nice YAML files that are put together that make it pretty clear cut as to what exactly this rule is attempting to match on and what's the specific criteria in order for this rule to actually trigger. Sigma HQ is also a great repository that is built with a ton of these Sigma rules already. Let's look at something pretty simple. Here's like a clear PowerShell history, and let's kind of walk through exactly kind of how this file is structured. The good thing about the kind of Sigma standard and really their main objective is that once you understand how to read these YAML files, then it'll apply to any other Sigma YAML rules that you may be looking at. So here within the top, we really just kind of have some metadata fields here. So we're getting the title of the rule ID that the author signed, worked on this one, the date that it was published, the last date that it was modified. So really just some meta details around the activity around this particular rule. We then also get the description, a little more clear to us as to what this rule is trying to detect. So, and here we have here detects keywords that could indicate clearing the PowerShell history. So let's now actually step into the detection criteria. So this will detail what we have to find in order for this rule to trigger. So here we have first our selection criteria. And these are structured here 1A, 1B, then they have 2, then they have 3. So the first piece of this will be our field name. So here we see script block text. Well, if you're following the series, how exactly would that pertain to us? So if we look in within Grafana here, and let me actually trigger one of these, I'll say, who am I? So I have my endpoint set up for PowerShell logging. I also have the Wazoo agent set up to collect those logs and send them to the manager. And here we see our log here. So we see PowerShell script, who am I, executed. So, and then we see our field names that pertain to our PowerShell event. So if we compare that back to what we see within the Sigma rule file, here they're looking at script block text. Well, how exactly would that pertain to us? Well, here we also see our script block text field. So our full field name would contain this guy here. So if I'm looking to do a Wazoo rule example, or even a Preco rule, which we're about to get to here in a sec, this would be the field name criteria that we would match on. So that meaning that the script block text field, so that would be this field here itself, we needed to contain these characters. So a del for delete, or a remove item spelt out fully, or just RM. Pertains all to selection 1. And if you look at our condition here, we have to have only one match for the selection underscore, for any of these selection underscore rules, which are these guys here too, because we see the selection underscore 2, and then we see selection underscore 3. So one of these guys has to match, either this guy or this guy, but all of section 1 has to match, one wildcard. So meaning 1A would have to match and 1B would also have to match as well. So in order for this rule to actually trigger, what our script block text would actually have to look like, I'll copy and then paste this guy here. So that takes care of our criteria here of all of selection 1 would have to match, because our 1A will match because we have our remove item within our command, and then 1B is also going to match because we are including this command as well. Now we need to have one of selection underscore 2 or selection underscore 3. One of these also has to match for this rule to trigger. And here we see a contains, and not just it has to contain at least one of these, but it has to contain all of these commands. So it would have to contain this guy, and this guy. And then same for selection 3, this guy, and this guy, where up here within our selection A, you'll see that we just have contains. We don't have contains all. So it only has to match on one of these 3 items for rule 1 selection A to check off as, yep, this actually hit. So in order for our rule to trigger, what we would need to do is add all of these contents. And then I'll actually add a pipe here because that's going to be a commandlet. So that should be good. So if we run that, I had already deleted it during my testing. We see here that console host underscore history.txt does not exist. If we go back into Grafana, we should also see this guy here. So here then we see our PowerShell script running. And so here we see our script block text contents, and then we see the command that we just ran. If maybe understanding Wazoo's format or syntax of how it actually handles rules, if that's a little more difficult, with Preco, Preco is just taking advantage of Elastalert under the hood. So if you're familiar with writing queries within Kibana or Grafana, or interacting with your Wazoo indexer via the API, Preco allows us to build search queries that you could argue that it's maybe a little more human friendly to read and is easier for beginners to probably understand rather than trying to learn the syntax and criteria that make up building Wazoo rules. So this is just another option. Preco as well also has built-in alert outputting to like a webhook, to Jira, to Slack. So it has some built-in stuff that doesn't require us to build something internally to get some type of alert output. So, and the way that Preco is going to work is Preco is not going to be real time. And what I mean by that is that logs will not be going through Preco like how they do our Wazoo manager. The Wazoo manager is analyzing logs in real time, where Preco is going to sit on top. You can kind of think of it as sitting on top of our Wazoo indexer. And every minute it'll run queries that we define within our rules that we create. And it's going to see if it has any hits back. And under the hood, I have covered Elastalert in the past. I'm not going to get too into Elastalert in this video. However, Elastalert is the backbone of Preco. Preco itself is just like a web UI that we can use to make Elastalert rules. So in the previous video where we handled Elastalert, we were actually on the server itself and doing that through the CLI. Where with Preco, it's a little more user-friendly as well because we get a web UI and we can configure everything within Preco without having to jump on the server itself. And we can get started with it relatively quick. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into my op directory. I do already have Docker installed on this guy. So I'm not going to install Docker in this video, but I think I've done that in other videos, and there's tons of stuff online to help you with that if you need assistance. So we're first going to clone the Preco repo. I'm going to go ahead and go into there, and we'll need to first create a rule template directory and then also modify those permissions as well. And the rule template directory is nice because you can organize your Elastalert rules within Preco within different folders. You can have templates, and we can add some structure to our rules. So first, what we need to do is we now need to configure Preco prior to running it. So if I go into our config directory here, we have 2 files. We have our API file, and then we have our, I mentioned Elastalert. We have our Elastalert file. So Preco will need to connect to Elastic, and Elastalert will also need to connect to Elastic. Wazoo indexer. Darn, I keep doing that. So what I'm going to do is copy this block here. I'm going to open my api.config. I'm just going to blow all this away, because if you are following this series to the T, you know that we are using the Wazoo indexer And the Wazoo indexer is a fork of OpenSearch. So we will need to set this OpenSearch flag to true. Because the structure of how searches are made have changed a little bit between the Elastic and OpenSearch versions. So there's different query schemes that need to be followed, and this flag will allow us to do that. So the changes that we have to make here is we need to point to the host of our Wazoo indexer. And then we need to set if you are using HTTPS, we will need to set our Wazoo indexer credentials to connect to it. So same like what we did with Graylog in the future video. I do recommend creating like a separate Preco user. And what Preco is going to do, so it's not actually only going to read. So if you do create a Preco role, make sure that it not only can read all the indexes that sit within your Wazoo indexer, but it also needs the ability to write as well, because it is going to create its own index, and that's what it's going to use to keep track of where it's at in its searching. So because how I mentioned Preco is going to query our Wazoo indexer every minute. Well, let's say, for example, the Preco server goes down, or we have to do some maintenance, and we want it to pick up and we have to stop the Preco service to do so. Well, it needs to be able to pick up exactly where it left off. So it's going to write to a index that we can call whatever we want. I'll change that here in a sec. And that's what it's going to use to keep track of where it last searched within our Wazoo indexer, so that we can stop the service, bring it back online, and it's going to pick up exactly where it left off. However, I am going to be super lazy, and I'm just going to use the admin. Since this is a demo, I don't feel like creating that role in user. And I'll throw my password in there. And now I'm going to go ahead and change my write back index to leave it Preco, and I'll say, please subscribe. All right, so that's looking good. We should be done here. Now we also need to open the Elastalert.yaml file as well. So I'll go ahead and open this guy. And similarly, we need to point to our Elasticsearch host. And similarly, I'm going to just blow all this away and copy what we have within the Medium post. Our ES host is going to pertain to where our Wazoo indexer is. So I'll put in the IP address. In production environment, I would recommend actually using the host name and updating your internal DNS records to reflect that. We will be connecting with SSL. I'm going to set my verify certs to false because I'm going to be lazy during this demo as well. I'm going to change my username to admin because I'm also being lazy. And then I need to change my write back index to what we previously set as well, which was this Preco, please subscribe. And then I'll also go ahead and paste my password. And all right. We are good to go. So now we need to start Preco. Prior to doing so, we do need to set a environment variable real quick that's called Preco _ Elasticsearch. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And then this again will be the IP address of your Wazoo indexer. So I'll paste that there. That looks good. Now let's go ahead and run a Docker compose up and let's start Preco. All right, so we got our containers running. I'm going to go ahead and look at the logs of the Elastalert server to make sure it connected to our Wazoo indexer. We're getting SSL certificate errors, which whatever, that's fine. We don't care about. But good, we see our new index was created. So before jumping into Preco's web UI, I do recommend jumping into the logs of the Elastalert container and just make sure that you verify that the index has been created. So that looks good. Now we can go ahead and connect to Preco. If I remember what port we're listening on, it is 8080, so okay. It is going to be HTTP. If you want HTTPS, I'd recommend just throwing a reverse proxy on top of it. And now here we have Preco. So let's first go ahead and create a new rule. So I'm going to give this rule a name. I'll just call it demo. So now we need to specify our index that we want to search on. So the index is going to pertain to where our Wazoo alerts are written to. So here our Wazoo alerts are written to Wazoo-alerts-shock fortress. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this index. And I'm also going to include a wildcard because my indexes are going to be rotating. So the next day my index rotates to a new one. If I didn't include this wildcard, my searches would essentially stop because that index doesn't have actual data being written to it currently because it's been rotated and data is writing to another index. So make sure you do include that wildcard there. The time type, I'm going to leave to default. The time field, I'm going to go ahead and select my UTC timestamp that I have here, which I don't remember if I included how to generate this within our previous Graylog video. So I will include the rule. I'll include the Graylog rule to this blog post where you can copy and use that as well, because we need the format like this. Like you see our Zulu format that we have here for our timestamp that is needed, or else Preco, because this timestamp format, not only does Preco need to be able to understand it, but Elastalert also needs to be able to understand it. If we use our default one that we have, Preco will generate alerts within the web UI. So it'll populate our little chart here with logs. So you would think we'd be good, but Elastalert, which is actually making the query to our Wazoo indexer that's running under the hood, does not like this timestamp format. So it's never going to actually query anything. So if you are using Graylog and you're using this different, and you're noticing hey, I'm not getting any alerts, just make sure you add this timestamp UTC field, which again, I'll include the pipeline rule of how to do that. We're going to go ahead and select our timestamp UTC. So good, we're still getting our populated alerts. Now let's go ahead and build the search query. So here is our search query. So here we're going to group under documents. Let's go ahead and build our search filter. So if you want to use the builder approach, I like using the manual approach because it's a lot more flexible. You can do a lot more stuff with it. But with the builder approach, you see that it gives us the field name. So let's say I want to look for anything, agent name, and then what's the name of the agent is this guy. So if I select add filter, and then we get a few options here. Contains, does not contain, is empty, is not empty, or matches some regex syntax that we want to use. So if I go ahead and paste my agent name here, you'll see now Preco is loading in all of our alerts. And I like that it does this too, because we can quickly see if our detection rule is actually matching against what we want it to match against, which is super helpful. So let's go ahead and let's simulate another example of where we can use Preco to detect when a scheduled task has been created. One strategy that malware usually tries to take advantage of is scheduling itself to be executed. So any task that becomes scheduled, that may really be something that we want to take a look at and make sure isn't anything malicious. So go ahead and copy this guy and throw this into a command prompt. See, it already exists. That's if I want to add it. I'll say yes. So our scheduled task has been created. And you'll notice here that we're just calling notepad.exe. But in a attacking situation, malware is going to try to call its own executable to run at a certain time. That'd be something that we want to be aware of. And you'll notice, so after running that command, if I refresh here, we see we get a sysmon event 1, process creation. And then here we see our command that we ran to actually to set the task scheduler. But you'll also notice that while we are logging this event, our rule level is still set to a 3. So it doesn't make it obvious to us that, hey, this is actually something that we want to get eyes on and investigate. We can, and of course you could 100% build a Wazoo rule that also matches on this and raises the severity, but we can also use Preco to do the same. So if we go back into Preco, I'll copy the rule that we have in the blog. I'm going to go into unfiltered, and then I'm going to paste this here, and then we should get a hit. And sure enough, we do. So let's kind of walk through what this rule is detecting. So we're first looking at our parent image field. which if we go back to Grafana, we see our parent image is contained here, and we see our cmd.exe. So we know a command prompt was used to actually run this command. So, and of course, this being a wildcard, so saying anything can come before we match on this regex pattern, which would be / and then cmd.exe. We then have an and. So we're not saying this condition has to match, but this one also has to match. We can also do an or statement as well if you choose. So we're able to be super flexible when it comes to writing our rules. We're saying the field name that we then have to match on is the command line. So if we go back here, we see that this is stated here. And then our command line needs to contain this regex string. So we have wildcard on the scheduled task binary, meaning that the string, this particular string, just has to exist anywhere within the command line that we see. Normally, it's probably going to always be at the beginning, but this gives us the ability to detect it anywhere within the command line. We then need to, and here you'll notice the regex coming into place because we are having to escape this special character here. So we're using our / here to escape that. And then we're matching on create because that would tell us that a schedule has been created. And then that the /ru flag was also involved in the command because that sets the runtime user. So if malware is trying to set this to an administrative user, that would be suspicious because it would inherit those roles and be able to run escalated commands and activities that maybe a normal user may not be able to do. So this criteria needs to meet for us to say, oh yeah, this is something we need to get eyes on and detect. So, and we see that the rule is being detected. So that's really good. So if we close this out, we see then too that our graph also has a match. So that's good. We can then set realert standards. So if you don't want to get like spammed with alerts, then you can set that criteria here of how often you want to get an alert. I'm just going to set this to 0 so that it's always alerting in real time. There's a few other options you can set as well. And then if you scroll down, you get to your destination. So for this, and you'll see there's a ton of destination here. There's some third-party services we can take advantage of. I'm going to just post out to a listening webhook, which I'm going to go to this webhook site that I like to use to verify that stuff's working correctly when it comes to webhooks. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL and paste that in here. And I'll go ahead and you can actually run a test. So if we actually go ahead and test, and we can actually send real alerts as well. So this test will search within whatever time frame you want it to be. So this would be the previous hour and send real alerts. So if we go ahead and run this, we see it starting and it's checking. We should see that it got a hit and we see, yeah, it had one trigger. And if we go back to our webhook, we now see we have some data in here. So we got a post from Preco and it posts all of our JSON of the alert, which is awesome because now we can do whatever we want with this. In the future, we will send this directly to Shuffle and have Shuffle then create case and do escalations and do a lot more stuff with this data. But it's really nice that it gives us just the full JSON payload of the alert because now we can do a lot with it. And you'll see we have nothing queried yet because again, this is only going to serve every minute. Right? Elastalert is going to invoke our Wazoo indexer only every minute. And I don't know if I showed you guys that within the config file. So if we open up our Elastalert file, here you can change that frequency. So I've left it at just every 60 seconds, but you can change this frequency as you want. And if you go into your query log, you can see a little more details on the query. What's also helpful too is the time that it was taken to run that search. So if this is in like a 5 to 10 second range, something that's taking that long to be searched, that's a really good indicator that there's probably room for improvement on your search query. So it's really good feedback that we get where we can verify, okay, yeah, this is a rule that's not very expensive, or this is taking a long time to get back to us and we need to tweak this rule. Our alert log will then pertain to any time there was a hit. So if I run this command again on my Windows endpoint, and now when the next query is made to our Wazoo indexer, again, in a minute, we'll get our hit. And sure enough, we got it. And if we go back to our webhook site, we got our data again. So it's looking good. And then you can create folders and you can kind of structure this how you want it to be. which helps keep you and your team organized. So that's going to wrap it up for today's video. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one.